5 with the Omicron variant detected in Clark County. 2 cases were reported there today, and there have been more than a dozen cases in Washington state so far. What's more, scientists say there will likely be many more.
They're estimating that more than 50% of the recent specimens submitted are likely to be the Omicron variant, but we don't know that for sure. We just know that it is increasing rapidly in Washington state as it is increasing rapidly elsewhere.
We should note 1 case in Clark County is associated with an outbreak linked to a wrestling tournament last week. We've been reporting on that. In fact, at least 34 cases of COVID-19 have been linked to that tournament. And in the meantime, if you're looking to find a COVID test before gathering with loved ones before the holidays, you're not the only one. The supply is limited, and health experts say it'll only get harder to snag a test as Omicron spreads. Here's Alma McCarty.
Health experts have yet to determine whether Omicron will cause more severe disease, but believe this variant is more transmissible. As more people look to get tested for COVID-19, the search for a rapid test at pharmacies like Walgreens and CVS proved to be a challenge. In Portland, appointments online for a drive-through test were nearly non-existent Monday. The stock of at-home rapid tests sold out completely in all but 1 location.
So you may need to do a little shopping around by phone and online to find those tests.
But if you didn't mind waiting in the rain, walk-up rapid tests were available here outside the Oregon Convention Center. The healthcare startup Curative has other locations and appointment times available across the area.
In terms of testing, the issue right now with testing is it will be a bit hard to come by, and the PCR tests in particular will be slowed down a bit. The good news about Omicron is that it seems to be picked up by all the normal tests.
Dr. Ann Loeffler, Deputy Health Officer with Multnomah County, says if you happen to get a test or have one on hand, it's not a bad idea to use it ahead of the holidays.
I think that's a great thing to do if, for example, you're going to be around people who are vulnerable.
She says the at-home tests are just as effective to indicate when someone is contagious, as long as you follow directions closely.
I call the swabbing, I call it rubbing and rolling, 15 seconds each side, kind of no joke, really picking up the lining of your nose there and not hurting yourself. You do not have to hurt yourself. You just have to do it with purpose.
If you can't find a test, Dr. Loeffler recommends having smaller gatherings, watching for symptoms, limiting exposures ahead of the holidays, and masking up. It really depends who you'll be around and whether everyone is vaccinated and boosted.
All right, Alma McCarty live for us. Alma, thank you so much. At the same time, U.S. health experts are also weighing in on holiday travel plans. In fact, Dr. Anthony Fauci says those who are vaccinated, and especially those who have had a booster shot, should feel safe to travel. We talked to people at PDX who say reuniting with family and vaccines and advances in treatment, they say amid all of that, they have more confidence this year.
Taking the right precautions and still being able to have that time with family and friends is important.
We have to live our lives, but carefully.
Safety precautions are in place at PDX. Masks are required, and today and next Monday, by the way, are expected to be the busiest days, with about 49,000 travelers at PDX per day. And amid the push to get vaccinated and boosted, companies are working on the first plant-based vaccine. Brandon Lewis from our Verified team has a look into those plans.
Brooklyn Nets point guard Kyrie Irving hasn't played a game in the NBA this season. He's unvaccinated because he says he has concerns about long-term health effects from the vaccine. And New York's vaccine mandate means he can't play on his home court. Irving credits going vegan in 2017 with turning his health around, and has said in interviews he would consider getting his shot if a plant-based vaccine is approved. So let's verify. Is a plant-based COVID-19 vaccine currently available to the public?
Our sources are Canadian biotech firm Medicago, Health Canada, the National Centre for Biotechnology Information, and the World Health Organization.
Generally, a plant-based vaccine is created by genetically modifying plants to produce an antigen, which is then extracted and used to create a vaccine. This is different than the vaccines currently authorized in the U.S., which use either mRNA technology or a a modified virus. Similar plant-based technology was used by the U.S. Department of Agriculture to create a vaccine for the Newcastle disease virus in poultry and a hepatitis B vaccine in Cuba. The WHO says plant-based vaccines offer a lot of benefits. They're often cheap to produce and remain stable for long periods of time. A number of pharmaceutical companies have announced plans for clinical trials of their plant-based COVID-19 vaccines. Medicago and GlaxoSmithKline began phase 3 clinical trials, which showed their vaccine has a 71% efficacy rate. A spokesperson for Medicago tells Verify they plan on submitting their 2-dose vaccine for authorization to Health Canada in the next few weeks. So for now, it's false that there's a plant-based COVID-19 vaccine currently available to the public. Medicago says it plans to also request authorization from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration once they receive approval from Health Canada. With your Verify, I'm Brandon Lewis.
Switching gears, staffing shortages are a challenge for schools across the state right now, especially in special education. In fact, in Portland Public Schools alone, they're looking for 10 special ed teachers and 5 psychologists. So our team spoke with Mary Darren, a speech language pathologist at PPS, and she says educators are having to deal with increased need this year. Safety and disruptive behavioral issues are getting prioritized, and that means state-mandated education for students with special needs is falling by the wayside. Plus, she says teachers are getting burned out.
We are at a tipping point because we're so stretched right now. Most of my colleagues have a foot out the door. The more people that leave, the worse this exacerbates everything. But at this point, I can't blame anyone for taking care of themselves.
So some parents who have kids with special needs have hired lawyers to get tutoring help through districts, and others have reached out to advocacy organizations like FACT Oregon. An update now in the redevelopment of the Lloyd Center. A company from Seattle will be in charge of the renovations. They're called Urban Renaissance Group, and they're planning to turn the mall into a residential and office space. They say they're not starting to change anything just yet. The mall is still open as normal for the holiday season. The Lloyd Center has been open as a mall since 1960, but of course, it's had a lot of financial problems in the last few years, and major anchor stores have closed up. The Fred Meyer and QFC strike is over. It ended less than a day after it began, and the union and grocery stores now have a tentative agreement. The strike over unfair labor practices was scheduled to run through Christmas Eve, but was called off after union representatives with Fred Meyer and QFC reached an agreement late Friday night.
As it was made really clear, the community really came out in full support of us. We could not have done it without our community support. We really appreciate everyone honoring our line. It was really fantastic to see so much energy and such great response from our neighbors. You know, we've had their back throughout the pandemic, and we were just so happy that they had ours.
The details won't be public until union members can review the deal and vote on it, but the union called the agreement exceptionally good. The grocery stores released a statement saying they're grateful for the associates, customers, and community. Meanwhile, workers at Burgerville have agreed to become the nation's first union contract at a self-standing fast food restaurant. More than 75% of employees at its stores participated in the vote over the past month. And under that new contract, workers will get a 3-month set schedule, paid vacation, paid parental leave, improved job safety, and more job security against unfair discipline. In a statement on Twitter, Burgerville said it looks forward to working with the union to make it the best restaurant to work at in the Pacific Northwest. Turning now to our housing crisis, we're following up on a new report that shows a record number of people, 126 people, died homeless in Multnomah County back in 2020. The latest, what's called Domicile Unknown report, shows that the leading causes of death were drug and alcohol use, specifically opioids and methamphetamine. The average age of people who died was 46 years old. More than half of the deaths were ruled accidental. Scott Kerman runs the Blanchet House in Portland's Old Town, and he says this report shows not only how severe the crisis was last year, but how bad it is now.
There's no question it's a life and death matter for many people who are houseless. What I'm mindful of is that these are 2020 figures, and by all accounts, things on the street with regards to meth and also fentanyl are much worse than they were in 2020. And so We have to remind ourselves as we're ending 2021, we're talking about 2020 numbers. So what's the conversation going to be a year from now?
Yeah, these reports and this data always comes out a year behind, so we'll see that next year. Kerman believes the situation, as you heard, has worsened for a lot of people since the beginning of the pandemic, and that more needs to be done to address the root causes of our housing crisis. The state of Washington passed a new law earlier this year requiring schools in that state to remove Native American mascots, requiring them. It's been a conversation that has been going on for a long time. Experts have found that these kinds of images, like that one there, are damaging for young Native Americans. So coming up on the story at 6 o'clock, we're going to hear from a student who was fed up with seeing her culture inside a display case at her high school.
To me, it looked like animals in a zoo. We've heard that a lot. To see those mannequins in the case that were supposed to represent me, people were telling me I should feel honored by that. I don't feel honored. Why do I have to feel honored by something that doesn't represent me?
We'll explain how she went all the way to the Washington state legislature to get her school's mascot changed, and how experts say mascots of Native Americans can bring about long-lasting cultural trauma for young kids. Again, that's coming up at 6 on The Story.